On today's episode of Future Says, we have Vanessa Eriksson, Chief Digital Officer at Zenseact, one of the foremost leaders in autonomous driving. Vanessa is a true pioneer, with experience as Chief Data Officer at Nets and Telia, as Chief Data Officer Advisor at PwC, and she's also currently a member of the board at Fedesmo. Hello and welcome to Future Says, Vanessa. I'm delighted to have you on the show today to talk about all things autonomous driving.
Thank you, Sean. It's a delight to be here. And thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. So in the not so distant future, we're led to believe that we'll all be living in a smarter, a new world with less congestion on our roads, with reduced carbon emissions, with new services like automated logistics, like on-demand healthcare. We'll live in a world with fewer deaths on our road. Still today, 90% of car accidents can come down to human error. And of course, many of them can be eradicated with this exciting, innovative autonomous driving technology. Add to all of these statistics the never-ending optimism from Elon Musk, the exciting news that Apple are secretly developing an autonomous car set for release before 2024. And you get a sector with a crazy amount of hype and buzz and excitement. But, I'm afraid there's always a but, these cars are always going through phases of recalibrating the timelines and the expectations. Recently, Ford pushed back their developments from this year to next year in a post-pandemic world. We see regulators getting more and more involved. And really, will we be able to see drivers relinquish the wheel soon? The desire to get answers to these questions and separate fact from fiction is why I'm so happy to have Vanessa on the show and to hear her thoughts. So Vanessa, without further ado, can you give us a high-level introduction to Zenseact and the critical role you are playing to the future of this space?
Sure, thank you. I think at Zenseact, I've been there for a year now, and I love their ambition. Trailblazing it is. Zenseact originated from Volvo. And, like you say, Carlsberg, probably the best beer in the world. Zenseact, from Volvo, probably the safest car in the world, right? I mean, that's what its heritage is. And we're building up on that because our technologies, our methodologies, everything, our software is built around with a safety first mindset. Because, you touched upon the accidents and absolutely, we've got 1.3 million traffic accidents in a year, 50 million of them non-fatal, but still people end up disabled for life. We also see a vulnerable group in here. You got the cyclists, you got the pedestrians, the motorbikers, and we want to make a difference. So that is really our mission. We want to preserve life. We want to accelerate the move towards zero collisions with our autonomous software. So that is also where we got our motto, towards zero faster. So I think what we're also looking for is really building a world not where, we just get our autonomous software, our driving software out somewhere in the world. We want to drive, accelerate safety first everywhere. So that is really our priority. So if you're looking at, so what are we going to do with the next generation coming out? How are we bringing safety to the roads? Because I think even if, if you're intoxicated, don't go in your car. Don't sit in the driver's seat. But if you happen to do that, we want that the car will actually take you from, point A to point B safely. We're giving you your life back. You can either look at your phone, you can do something else, relax and let the car do its driving for you. So our intention is safety first.
And I think that's some of the interesting benefits. I think we often think about safety first in the zero collisions, but I think the world in an autonomous car can bring us so many new services. You mentioned being on your phone and entertainment. All of that is going to be a whole new world. But Vanessa, can you tell us about the where we are today then in this development and in this future? What sort of projects are you working on right now, in 2021?
I'm working with some really exciting projects, but I'm a data geek at heart. So I'm going to tell you about my data, the work that we're doing here. Because, when you have so much data, because I think, each of our test cars have got about 23 sensors. We got the LiDARs, the radars, the sonars, the video feeds coming in. We're collecting 50 terabytes of data per car in a day. That's a lot of data. So I think, the first thing that I came in and I looked into was, so what is the strategy that we need and how can we actually organize this data, to have control over it? And the way we did it was, think factory, because now you've got all this data, you can imagine a factory full of workers, and how do you actually, first is getting the seamless connection, data to everybody who needs it, to our developers, our engineers, our data scientists, everybody. And that's what we looked at, for IT, for digital, for security, giving people just access to the data. The second, what we did was look at the data ecosystem, because here, knowing that we're going to be sharing data with China and the rest of the world, how do you actually build that data ecosystem? Giving access then to our collaborators, you've got consultants, you've got so many people in here, how do you actually, what are the accesses and how do you actually work with that effectively? So that was thinking, a data ecosystem. The third leg that we looked into was innovation, and that's where we've also done our partnering. I had a visit this morning with the AI Edge Lab, because you constantly churning out models. You can't sit down and think like, this is it, we got this now, because you've got to be thinking 8 years down the road, what is the technology? If it's the federated learning, it's the swarm learning, where am I going? Continuously having this factory kind of setup to churn out new models for you. And then lastly, which is most important, and I think companies struggle in this area, it's the whole governance bit. Because, being owned by Volvo and ECARX, a Chinese company, who owns my data? And the first time I walked into Zenseact, and I just heard these guys say, it's not ours, it's Volvo's. And I said, I don't care. If it's in this building, who does it belong to? So getting the ownership, and then at the end of it, the quality. Because if I don't trust my data, whatever analytics, whatever insights I'm getting, nobody's going to trust that. Because they say, we don't know if that data is accurate. So these were the ways, the 4 big building blocks that we set ourselves, our strategy around. But at the end of the day, Sean, it is really, you can work with data if you have customer consent, right? That is key for every business today. But I think if you go back to the accidents then, previously when you've had accidents, road accidents, it took a while to get access to that data and then to start working, analyzing it. So by the time you actually wanted to impact the next generation of cars, it took months, sometimes even years. And that's not the case today. Because today we have, you can already start, you're building your models, you're deploying, you're analyzing, you're pushing out not only to the next generation of cars, but to the cars that are already out there in the field, which you can prevent, you can drive safety, not in years any longer, but days and hours. And that is really, this fantastic feeling that, yes, we are adding value to, to the whole society, to the world, making a difference. And that's the ambition that, each one of us at Zenseact really love, because you're changing, you're transforming the entire way the traffic or the autonomous driving is going to change, make big changes here for all of us.
It's brilliant. And I know your experience before Zenseact, Vanessa, you were a Chief Data Office Advisor at PwC. So you have a lot of experience with a lot of different industries. Are those 4 building blocks standard no matter the company in the industry, would you say?
No, I don't think so. Because I think it depends on each company. How do you want to set up? I think it is over here at Zenseact, the truth be told, I've never seen so much data. So, we're collaborating with HPE with just looking at data at the storage, because also I'm going back to another topic now, but previously companies just hoarded data, because you didn't know what it was for. I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but hey, data is important, so let's just keep it. We figure out what we want to do with it. And I think that's so the strategies are different depending on the company that you have. But over here, with the data loads that we saw, because today we have test cars, but our software is going to be in vehicles, in the fleets, and we know that the amount of data is going to just explode. So that's where the factory mindset came in, how do we then structure this? So no, this is not what I've done in the other companies.
Yeah. And so I think broadly some of those topics would be relevant. You mentioned governance and sort of ethics. Can you expand on that and your work in that space at Zenseact and elsewhere maybe?
I think ethics is always important, right? And especially AI ethics, because you have, it's on the, on an EU level, what are we doing within this area? And I think especially now, as we're finding this challenge in working with, especially with China, the new laws that have come out. I think, all of us are trying to, interpret them and say, what does this really mean? And we're working with companies to help us, understand the laws. That is challenging. So I think no matter what it is, today you see countries coming out with their own policies, and this open use of data is going to, kind of trickle down. So, I think it is very important for each and every one of us in our companies. It doesn't matter what we're doing. All of us are dribbling with AI in some level or the other. Some are a little more mature than the others. But I think to make sure it can't be wrong, to make sure that you've got your AI, ethics in place, a board or small board or whatever to validate and verify, even if my technology, what is my technology doing? Am I doing it for the purpose that I'm actually saying I'm out there, what I really look for? For our case, it's safety. Are we actually using it for that? Or, because you've got the technology, am I using it for something else? And I think it is very important for every company to start questioning yourselves and just take a look.
And we had Maria Luciana Cente from PwC on a couple of weeks ago, and she spoke at length about the new EU regulation and how they've divided it into different levels of risk per application of artificial intelligence. Does, autonomous driving, is it touched on in that regulation? Are there other regulations you need to abide by in this space, Vanessa?
No, I think we're looking, we're trying to cover the entire spectrum. So we've got the whole GDPR, we've got our code of conduct, we've got the international barrier protocol, looking at China, where we've got, compliance companies helping us in that entire space. So I think that, and then now finally we're looking at an ethics board. We're looking at the entire spectrum, because I don't think you want to, you don't want to end up with fines. You don't want to end up in, bad publicity. And I think at the end of the day, it's also each and every one of us, because we've got a conscience to deal with. And I don't think you want to, it's questioning yourself. What am I doing? Yeah. I think I go from that. What am I doing? Is it okay to do this? Is it legal?
And so on the AI ethics board, there's such a push to become more ethical in the use of the technology. I know Zenseact are hiring a lot right now. I see different job applications every day, Vanessa. So, are there new roles that we're hiring for today? Are there new roles that we'll be hiring for tomorrow around ethics or around anything else per se?
No, you're right, Sean. We've got a lot of roles just now because we're looking for engineers, but then specifically within my area, I'm looking for a head of enterprise, like a CIO role, enterprise IT, to drive that whole digitalization bit, more into detail with me. And I'm also looking for, I've just hired a head of data governance and an enterprise architects. So it's more specific roles that I'm looking for because here we're looking at the foundation, the data foundations to get us going. So we have a legal department and they look after their own needs. So, I mean, for me, I can speak about, the data and the security area. I've just also hired a head of data, a head of security for Zenseact.
Okay. And can you talk to me then a bit more about your role at PwC? What learnings did you take from that? I mean, I think it's one of the first roles I've seen that's an advisor to the chief data officer. So how did that happen?
Yes. And I think it was one of the reasons we did that was, creating this advisory role because, I actually believe, Sean, that I was one of the first chief data officers in Sweden because, at that time I was at Telia and I was working a lot with Deborah Logan from Gartner in creating, so what would the chief data officer role look like? What are the challenges? Because we were trying to anchor that. I was trying to anchor that at Telia at that time. And I knew the whole struggle, because, and then being part of various data networks, I also saw the struggle with other companies. So that's why we did this at PwC to say, okay, so how could we address this towards other companies, large enterprises who actually don't want to stick their neck out and get this role in place. You had head of data, head of enterprise data, and if data is that important to you, why aren't you, appointing this person to lead the data for you? With that said, however, from that time to today, I see a lot of chief data officers appointed. So I think we did something right.
And I know you mentioned before that you foresee the chief data officer as being on the same footing in companies as the chief financial officer. Is that there today? Will that be there tomorrow? Where does that stand?
No, I see this the CFO, the chief financial officer. I think that this role actually helps the chief data officer a lot. I think what I felt in the past, Sean, was especially coming from Telia, you had a chief technology officer and then with the data officer, because the technology officer had data as well. So that was a bit of a clash thing, with somebody questioning, well, what are you going to do differently compared to what I am doing today? And I think today with the CFO, the financial officer and the data, you've got very clear roles because the chief financial officer is really the investments, but they question the data quality. Where's my data coming from? Can I get the 360 view of, the data that we have in all our different silos? So I think that in a way, this is an enabler. He pushes or she pushes for the CDO data officer to be in place.
Yeah. And I think that comes down again to culture. And one thing we hear a lot on this series is that culture is one of the biggest blockers to gaining value from analytics.
Yes.
How do you recommend organizations build this data savvy culture, I guess?
So I think that you really need an awareness program or, pushing out, communicating as much as possible. Because so Zeneact was Zenuity previously. And as you know, we're working with a lot of data. But the first time I walked into the organization and they said, data. Because I said, where's your strategy? And they said, strategy. It's all over the place. And data, each and every one of us is working with data. So I think just data, and this is what I go around telling them, data usage does not equal data mindset. Just because I'm working with it doesn't make me, data savvy, or I know what I'm doing here. So I said, you've got to be looking at data to say, okay, where's my, what do I want? Am I getting my insights? Am I getting my investments? What is it really that I want the data to do for me? So, and today it's wonderful, a year down that journey, and it's so wonderful to hear people saying, hey, you put data on the map for us. So I still have a long way to go, but, small victories make you happy, don't they?
Of course, yeah. Putting data on the map, I like it. Sticking the flagpole.
Yeah. Yes. So there's a lot. There's a big journey ahead of us, but at least we are talking data, and I think that's the important part. Not to just say, yeah, well, it's here somewhere. Our data is all around the place. So yeah. I think it's just a small step in the right direction.
Good. I think another step on that journey and on journey towards the right sort of culture and mindset is another thing you're passionate about, Vanessa. It's diversity in the workplace. Can you talk to us about your initiatives in this space and where we sit on this important topic today?
Yeah, I think that, working in, especially at Zenseact, it's a very male-dominated space. You've got engineers and sadly, they would like to drive a more diversity, in this whole area, but there aren't so many. So when you go out with a job application or there's not so many CVs from women or, that we get in. And I think that is the challenge that we're feeling as well, that there are not so many women within technology. And as you know, Sean, there's a lot being done to address this, women in tech. There's so many groups. And I have my own Girls in Tech that I'm driving. So I think we do our best. I'm pushing, and I advocate for more women also in leadership. So trying to get, also questioning them. What about, and here it's not about just having more women, but also getting diversity. If we are men, getting more diversity in there. Where do we come from? Can we get more people so that we have a diverse group here because I think it's so much more fun when you have, different nationalities, and it just makes it more fun. Yeah.
So what's the secret to your success then, Vanessa, in a sector that you said might be some way male dominated? How have you been so successful, and what advice can you give others?
I've just come back from a 2-day offsite with the leadership team, and I got to hear from my colleague that I was resilient, and I've been here for a year now, Sean, and when you're hitting, you're driving your agenda, it kind of gets tough. It gets narrow, it gets tough, and you spend all your energy. And I think I really appreciated what this colleague said to me, because I reflected on that and I said, I've heard this throughout my journey, that I'm resilient, but I forgot about that because I'm just so into every day, keep pushing, that I forgot that Zenseact is no different from the other organizations that I've been. And then if I believe I'm successful because, just for me taking my step back, I realized, I did this here, and here. I kept pushing because, not everybody gets it. When you say, I'm here to solve a data problem, not everybody gets it. So you really have to go low enough to make your message understood. And when come on, there are days when you're so low, it's hard to pick up and say, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to get up and get going again? And I think it's sometimes taking that time, getting up and dusting it off, putting on the armor again and back out in the field. Yeah. I think that's been mine.
Good. Resilience. So that's the key takeaway there. We need to be more resilient. Excellent.
Yeah.
So, Vanessa, on this show, we talk to many people from many different industries about what the future says. Here today, we've heard about diversity, we've heard about culture. You mentioned earlier about the AI Edge Labs at Zenseact. Can you talk to us a bit more about what they do, what sort of modeling, what are you looking to predict there?
Yes, and I actually believe that that is the future because, where, so if you can imagine what Tesla is doing today, right? For every alert, for example, if you press hard on the brake, they are not collecting all the data. They are just taking the alerts and they are, continuously developing on the alerts. So that is here and now. But what we are looking for is kind of, 8 years down the road, because we are also doing this with our fleet inside. But what we're looking for is, further down the road, which is the federated learning, the swarm learning. And to give our viewers a bit of insight on what do we actually mean with that. So when you've got you've got many cars on the road, and you're collecting data from these cars. So instead of collecting it on the edge, maintaining that data, working, so it saves you the cost of transferring the data storage, data computing, and this data is then sent to an aggregator, and you have one kind of a main or a algorithm that comes out, a model that comes out, which is then pushed back to the cars, and you're working only with that algorithm. And that is the federated learning, where it is sent to an aggregator. On the other hand, you have swarm learning. So in that case, one of the cars or one of the devices would typically become the aggregator, work with the data and push it back out to the other vehicles. So these are the technologies, and this is cutting edge. This is, it's data. It's the future. That's how we see it. And I'm really pleased because we have, together with AI Sweden, HPE, and a lot of other companies, created this Edge Lab. And it's like the Hollywood for data, where, companies are investing in here to understand and sharing knowledge with one another on what is the model that's needed for the future? How do we actually work with our data, and how do we transfer it between countries, for example?
So all about federated learning then. So I read recently that Volvo hope that by the mid of this decade, I think a third of their revenues will be coming from autonomous vehicles. So are we already seeing federated learning in the field today, Vanessa? If not, when will we be seeing this?
No, we're not seeing that already today because we're still... so the challenge is you want more data and you want less data. I mean, we need data loads to start working with these algorithms to create this, to get lesser data. And this is the challenge. So we're working with them. And I think at this point, where we're worried about the privacy and the GDPR, how do we get these data sets to work with? So my colleagues have been so innovative. We're working with birds.
Okay.
So collecting data, bird patterns, how the birds are flying away. It is traffic,
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it's fantastic. That's a POC that they have just completed. So I think that's where it's going a bit slower than what we would have liked, because we're trying to make sure also that we are compliant when we're working with test data.
Yeah. And with all of this, these amazing innovative projects, I'm sure there are a lot of challenges. We've mentioned a few of them already, but is there any specific one that keeps you up at night, Vanessa, that you're particularly fearful of?
I'm as a Chief Digital Officer, I've got, in addition to just making sure the company is driving in the digital roadmap, I think I also have security and data. And I think it's security because you never rest. You never rest, where you've got, are we being attacked? And because that is even on the weekends, late in the evening. So while we have security as a service, that is a responsibility that does not go away. So making sure that we have, cybersecurity around our software, our IP.
Yeah, I think all of this, everything we've said today, it links nicely back into Fedesmo as well, and your new board membership there. It's a completely different space, but what learnings do you take, or how is that going at Fedesmo?
At Fedesmo, it is going really brilliantly. As you see, there's a lot of posting out, on LinkedIn with all the partnerships and the product that is being sold in many countries now. So I think that it is going really well for them as well. And I'm really happy then.
Brilliant. So you're very, very busy, Vanessa. And I'd like to conclude the conversation by just, again, a high-level overview of what the future says to you and to Zenseact and where are we heading?
Thanks, Sean. I think that the future is partnerships, collaboration, because you want speed, quick to market, and where we have excellent collaborators. I mean, especially with the data space, we're working with HPE, we're working with AI Sweden, and I think that is the future: a partnership model, a collaboration model, to be able to get your product out into the market as quickly as possible.
Lots to uncover, lots to explore. It's very, very exciting. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining. We'll add some details on the show notes, and I'm sure we'll see each other soon.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks for watching. Now, next up on altair.com/future says will be Bill Magro, Chief Technologist of High Performance Computing at Google. He'll be speaking about all things cloud computing. Hope to see you there.